Arnaldo and Estrea married on May 11, 2012, in Chicago, celebrating their union with family and friends at a cozy restaurant in the La Vida neighborhood. The evening was filled with laughter and joy as everyone toasted to the newlyweds' future. However, the happiness of that night would soon take a dark turn. In the early hours of May 12, 2012, as Arnaldo and Estrea drove home in his black Maserati, an argument erupted between them. The disagreement grew heated, and in a moment of uncontrollable rage, the unthinkable happened. Welcome to Latin Crimes. I'm Rachel, and today I'll be sharing one of the most shocking true crime stories from Latin America. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Estrea Carrera Rios was born on February 5, 1986, in the United States to a family of Latin origin. Though information about her early years is scarce, it is known that she grew up in the Chicago area with her parents, Antonio Carrera and Antonia Rios, and her 4 siblings. Victor, Claudia, Jasmine, and Edgar. Her family regarded her as a loving daughter, a good sister, and a loyal friend. Those who knew her described Estrea as an extroverted and independent young woman, intelligent and kind to everyone she met. In 2004, at the age of 18, she became a mother to a baby girl named Yavi Sanchez. Though no information is available about Yavi's father, from that point on, Estrea dedicated herself to working hard to support her daughter. Despite the demands of motherhood, she always found time to go out and have fun with her friends. It was during one of these nights out at a nightclub that she met Arnaldo Jimenez, a 27-year-old man who would drastically change her life. Arnaldo was born on February 19, 1982, in Texas but grew up in southwest Chicago, later moving with his family to Brighton Park from their first meeting. Estrea was captivated by Arnaldo, and they continued seeing each other for several months before moving in together and having a son named Jimenez. Their relationship was tumultuous from the start, as Arnaldo was known to be controlling and possessive. With the birth of their son, their problems intensified, escalating to physical violence. Although Estrea tried to hide the marks from Arnaldo's beatings, her family noticed and disapproved of the relationship. None of these incidents were reported to the police, but at one point, Estrea did seek a protective order against Arnaldo, which she later withdrew for unknown reasons. In early 2012, Estrea moved with her 2 children to an apartment in Burbank, a suburb south of Chicago, where she found work as a Spanish translator for a social welfare agency. Her friends and family believed that her relationship with Arnaldo had ended, so they were surprised when she announced that they were getting married on May 11th of that year. Many were unaware that they had recently rekindled their relationship, let alone that they were planning a wedding. The couple had applied for a marriage license on May 2nd, but Estrea kept it a secret until the last minute, telling only her father Antonio the day before the wedding so he could take care of the children while she enjoyed her wedding night with her future husband. On Friday, May 11th, Estrea called her cousin Sandy Lopez to invite her to a party, not mentioning it was for her wedding. Another cousin, Jamie Lopez, couldn't attend due to the short notice, and her sister Jasmine received a text message invitation on the day of the wedding but was also unable to attend. The small wedding ceremony took place at Chicago City Hall, followed by a celebration at a nearby restaurant with a few friends. After dinner, the couple and their guests took a limousine to a nightclub on the north side of the city, where they partied until around 4:00 a.m. On May 12th, when they decided to end the evening, everyone went their separate ways. Things seemed fine between the newlyweds, however. That was the last time Estrea was seen alive. Later on Saturday, May 12th, Estrea was supposed to pick up her 2 children from her father's house, but when she didn't show up, her family started to worry. It was unusual for her not to come for her kids. Her siblings tried calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. They decided to go to her house, but despite knocking insistently, no one opened the door. Although they were concerned, they saw that her vehicle wasn't parked outside and thought she might have gone out with Arnaldo. Their anxiety grew when Estrea didn't show up the next day for Mother's Day on Sunday, May 13th. By then, it had been over 36 hours since anyone had seen or spoken to her. Her family and friends immediately feared something terrible had happened, as she would never have missed such a special occasion with her children. That same Sunday, Burbank police received a strange call from Arnaldo's sister, requesting a welfare check at her sister-in-law's house. During the brief conversation, without giving many details, she mentioned that her brother and his wife had an argument, and she was worried something might have happened to her. The officers went to perform the welfare check at Estrea's home, where they met her family, who were very anxious because they hadn't seen her in almost 2 days. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the officers decided to enter Estrea's condominium on the 3rd floor of the building. The detectives found no signs of forced entry, and when they went inside, they were surprised to see that nothing appeared out of place. However, when they entered the bathroom, they encountered a horrific scene. They discovered the lifeless body of the 26-year-old woman in the bathtub, still wearing the silver sequin cocktail dress from her wedding night. Although the victim had multiple stab wounds, the police found no blood evidence in the house, indicating that she had been attacked elsewhere and brought to the apartment. Since she was still wearing her wedding dress, it was possible she was killed shortly after leaving the nightclub in the early hours of May 12th. To many, it was evident that the last person she had been seen with was her new husband, Arnaldo Jimenez, but he was nowhere to be found. Interviewing the newlyweds' family and friends, investigators discovered that in the early hours of May 12th, while still at the nightclub, Arnaldo and Estrea had a heated argument. Surveillance cameras outside the establishment confirmed this version, showing the couple arguing. Although the footage didn't show any violent actions, their body language indicated they were visibly upset. The footage ended with the newlyweds crossing the street and getting into Arnaldo's vehicle, a black 2006 Maserati sedan. They made a U-turn and presumably headed back to Estrea's condominium. This was the last image captured of Estrea alive. From the beginning of the investigation, Estrea's death was classified as a homicide, which was confirmed the next day with the release of the forensic report. It determined that she had suffered more than 18 stab wounds. According to the Burbank Police Department, it was a brutal crime. Initially, the police thought Arnaldo Jimenez might be in danger himself, as neither he nor the car they were last seen in was found at his home. However, he soon transitioned from being a presumed victim to a primary suspect. Detectives continued to delve into the couple's life, discovering that their 3-year relationship had been marked by violence, which was why Estrea's family disapproved of Arnaldo. Those close to Estrea believed the wedding might have been rushed because she didn't want anyone to dissuade her, or because Arnaldo pressured her and she feared rejecting him due to his violent nature. One of Estrea's friends confirmed that the marriage was not voluntary. She stated that she had spoken to Estrea just 2 days before the wedding and was told that the reason she was getting married was that Arnaldo had threatened to take her children away. During the investigation, the police also uncovered Arnaldo's extensive criminal history. Court records from 2003 showed that an ex-partner had accused him of domestic assault, but the complainant did not appear in court, resulting in the charges being dropped. The following year, in 2004, he was convicted of a minor fraud offense, and in 2007, he was arrested on multiple drug charges along with his brother, Humberto Jimenez. Although Estrea told her family and friends that Arnaldo worked in construction, they always had their doubts, suspecting he might be involved in drug trafficking, which would explain his luxurious lifestyle, including the expensive black Maserati he likely used to flee. On May 15th, 2 days after Estrea's body was found, a court in Illinois issued an arrest warrant for Arnaldo Jimenez, charging him with first-degree murder. The manhunt began immediately. Investigators discovered that Arnaldo owned property in Fort Texas, near the Mexico border by the Rio Grande, and had family in North Carolina. Due to his ties to Texas, it was believed he might have fled there first, likely planning to cross into Mexico. When police interviewed Arnaldo's friends and family, one of them revealed that before disappearing, Arnaldo had instructed them to tell anyone, including the police, that he had gone to Mexico if asked about his whereabouts. With this information, the Burbank police contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, to assist in the search for Arnaldo. On May 17th, the Northern District Court of Illinois issued a federal arrest warrant after Arnaldo Jimenez was charged with fleeing to evade prosecution. Over 30 law enforcement agencies joined federal agents in the search for Arnaldo, offering a $110,000 reward for information leading to his capture. Estrea's tragic death left her family utterly shocked and devastated. They couldn't comprehend how the charming girl who always made them smile was suddenly gone, and they hadn't had the chance to say goodbye. Amid tears, her family and friends held a private ceremony to bid her farewell. After the wake, the funeral procession moved to St. Mary Catholic Cemetery, where she was buried next to her mother, Antonia, who had passed away years before Estrea's murder. Her children were placed in the care of her siblings and maternal grandfather. Unfortunately, the case faded from public attention shortly after, and investigators presumed that Arnaldo had successfully fled the country. However, the story resurfaced a few months later when a chance discovery provided a crucial missing piece to the ongoing investigation. When the police obtained Arnaldo's phone records, they discovered that his cell phone had traveled south quickly after Estrea's death. On May 12th, the day after their wedding, the phone moved from Chicago to southern Illinois and showed repeated use in Memphis, Tennessee, and even Arkansas. The next day, when Estrea's body was found, the suspect's phone pinged in Houston, Texas, and later that night in Hidalgo, a city right on the Mexican border. At that point, authorities believed Arnaldo had reached the Mexican state of Durango, where he was likely receiving support from local relatives. Despite his successful escape in the Maserati, investigators doubted he had fled the area in the vehicle, as such a recognizable car would have been detected on highways or traffic cameras along any route between Chicago and the border. Therefore, they continued to track the car until in October 2012, nearly 5 months after the crime, they announced that it had been recovered. The car was found in a garage belonging to Arnaldo's brother, Humberto Jimenez, whose Brighton Park home was raided by the Drug Enforcement Administration (DEA) in late September of that year. According to court records, Humberto was accused of helping run a drug distribution network that moved large quantities of cocaine through multiple stash houses in the Chicago area. The DEA had been monitoring him for months, even before Estrea's murder. According to the Chicago Tribune, the agency had wiretapped at least 6 of Humberto's phones. Court documents revealed that on May 13th, the day Estrea's body was found, Humberto had told someone over the phone that he had an emergency and later referred to a big problem he had to help resolve. At that time, his phone traveled south from Chicago and then headed to Tennessee, Arkansas. And Texas, it was believed that he traveled south with Arnaldo and then dropped him off at the Mexican border before returning to Chicago. Upon discovering Arnaldo Jimenez's Maserati in his brother's garage, agents knew their theory that he had been helped by his family to escape was correct. The vehicle was meticulously analyzed in the following days. Inside, forensic experts found bloodstains that had been attempted to be cleaned. The analysis confirmed that the DNA matched Estrea's. With this discovery, detectives quickly concluded that Arnaldo had killed his wife inside the car shortly after leaving the Chicago nightclub and then transported her body to the apartment where it was later found. The police did not specify whether the murder weapon was recovered from the vehicle, but they admitted there was a significant amount of evidence inside that incriminated Arnaldo. Despite the FBI receiving over 450 tips about the suspect's possible whereabouts in the following years, the search was fruitless. On May 8, 2019, nearly 7 years after Estrea's murder, Arnaldo Jimenez was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, becoming the 522nd criminal included in the infamous list. His wanted poster described him as a 37-year-old man with black hair and brown eyes. Law enforcement presumed his appearance might have changed over the years, not only due to aging but also because he likely altered some physical features to avoid identification. By then, authorities believed he might be in a city just across the Texas border. According to the FBI website, it was also possible that the criminal was hiding somewhere in the southwestern United States, possibly living under a false name. Known aliases for the fugitive included Arnaldo Jimenez with a G instead of a J at the beginning of his last name, Arnaldo Rochelle Jimenez, and possibly Manuel Reyes. Despite the reward for his capture being increased to $100,000 at that time, authorities were unable to locate him. The latest update on the case, available on the FBI's website, was on May 26, 2023, when the reward was increased to $250,000 in an effort to catch him. Whether this latest incentive will be enough to capture Arnaldo Jimenez, now 42 and still one of the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives, remains to be seen. Until then, Estrea's story remains unresolved, and her children, now 20 and 14 years old, continue to wait for justice. To continue our exploration of this tragic and disturbing case, we can dive deeper into several key aspects, including the psychology of Arnaldo Jimenez, the social and familial impacts of the crime, the investigation, and the ongoing manhunt for justice. These elements will help us understand the broader context of the case and its implications. 1. The psychological profile of Arnaldo Jimenez. Arnaldo Jimenez's violent tendencies, controlling behavior, and ultimate decision to murder his bride reveal a troubled and potentially dangerous personality. Here we can examine his psychological profile and the possible factors that led him to commit such a heinous crime. Control and possessiveness. From the start of his relationship with Estrea, Arnaldo demonstrated controlling and possessive tendencies. These are red flags often seen in individuals prone to domestic violence. His desire to dominate and exert power over Estrea escalated over time, culminating in physical abuse. This need for control likely stemmed from deep-seated insecurities. As people who seek to control others often feel powerless in other areas of their lives. Escalation of violence. Domestic violence tends to follow a pattern of escalation, and in Arnaldo's case, the relationship worsened after the birth of their son. The added stress of fatherhood, combined with his possessive nature, may have exacerbated his abusive tendencies. Instead of seeing the family as a unit of love and support, Arnaldo saw his partner and children as extensions of himself, which made him more aggressive when things didn't go his way. Fear of losing control. The fact that Arnaldo killed Estrea just hours after their wedding suggests that something triggered his worst instincts. It is likely that, despite the wedding, Arnaldo sensed that Estrea was not entirely committed to the relationship. Her family disapproved of him, and she may have expressed doubts about their future together. Feeling like he was losing control, Arnaldo acted out violently. His mindset was likely shaped by the idea that if he couldn't control Estrea, no one could, leading to the murder. Narcissism and lack of empathy. Arnaldo's ability to carry out such a brutal murder, followed by his calculated escape, indicates a lack of empathy. Narcissists often view the people around them as objects to serve their needs, rather than individuals with their own emotions and autonomy. Arnaldo's decision to flee, rather than take responsibility for his actions, reinforces the idea that he viewed himself as more important than anyone else. His actions show a complete disregard for the life he took and the devastation he left behind. 2. The impact on Estrea's family and children. The murder of Estrea Carrera Rios had a devastating impact on her family, especially her 2 children, who were left without their mother. We can explore the ripple effects of this tragedy and the long-lasting emotional consequences for her loved ones. The children's trauma. Estrea's 2 children, Yavi and Dean, faced unimaginable trauma after the loss of their mother. Losing a parent in such a violent and senseless way often leads to deep psychological scars. While they were placed in the care of their extended family, they would have to cope with the long-term effects of this loss, including grief, confusion, and possibly feelings of abandonment. As they grow older, they may also struggle with understanding why their mother was killed by someone who was supposed to love her. Family grief and guilt. Estrea's siblings and parents were left in shock and grief after her murder. Many family members, particularly those who were aware of Arnaldo's abusive behavior, may feel a sense of guilt for not being able to prevent her death. Even though they disapproved of the relationship, they were likely powerless to stop the cycle of violence. The family's pain is compounded by the fact that they couldn't say goodbye to Estrea or help her escape Arnaldo's control before it was too late. The community's reaction. In cases of domestic violence that end in murder, the community often feels the impact as well. Estrea's friends and neighbors, many of whom likely admired her for her strength and independence, were stunned by her sudden and violent death. It's possible that many of them didn't know the extent of the abuse she endured, as victims of domestic violence often keep their suffering hidden out of shame or fear. Estrea's murder serves as a harsh reminder of the dangers of domestic abuse, particularly when the warning signs are not taken seriously. 3. The investigation and the ongoing manhunt. The investigation into Estrea's murder, while initially promising with the discovery of key evidence, eventually hit roadblocks as Arnaldo Jimenez successfully fled the country. We can explore the complexities of the investigation and the challenges law enforcement faces in capturing him. The role of evidence. Forensic evidence played a crucial role in piecing together what happened to Estrea. The discovery of her body, still in her wedding dress, along with the blood evidence in the Maserati, allowed detectives to determine that she had been killed in the car. This evidence was essential in classifying her death as a homicide and identifying Arnaldo as the prime suspect. However, the murder weapon was never publicly confirmed, and this missing piece of evidence could have further strengthened the case against Arnaldo. Fleeing the country. Arnaldo's swift escape complicated the investigation. His criminal history and ties to drug trafficking likely gave him access to networks that helped him evade capture. The involvement of his brother Humberto and the use of his family's resources allowed Arnaldo to flee across state lines and eventually into Mexico. Law enforcement's ability to track his phone movements provided critical insights into his escape route, but once he crossed the border, their jurisdiction became limited, making the manhunt more difficult. The challenges of international manhunts. Capturing fugitives who flee across borders is a notoriously difficult task. While the FBI has been involved in the search for Arnaldo, locating someone in another country, especially if they have changed their identity or physical appearance, is incredibly challenging. Law enforcement agencies in the United States can collaborate with Mexican authorities, but there are limits to what can be done when someone goes into hiding in rural or remote areas. The FBI's top 10 most wanted list. Arnaldo's addition to the FBI's most wanted list brought renewed attention to the case. This designation increases the likelihood that he will be recognized or reported, especially with the large reward attached. However, despite hundreds of tips, Arnaldo has managed to evade capture, highlighting the difficulty in tracking fugitives with connections to criminal networks. His ability to remain on the run for over a decade suggests that he may be receiving help from family members or associates, which further complicates the search. 4. The broader implications of domestic violence. Estrea's murder is a stark reminder of the dangers posed by domestic violence and the urgent need for intervention and support for victims. This case illustrates several broader societal issues that need to be addressed to prevent similar tragedies. The importance of recognizing warning signs. In many cases of domestic violence, there are warning signs that go unnoticed or unaddressed. Estrea's family was aware of the abuse she endured but may have felt powerless to help her, especially when she withdrew the protective order against Arnaldo. Victims of abuse often feel trapped, either because they fear retaliation from their abuser or because they believe there is no way out. Raising awareness about the signs of abuse and encouraging victims to seek help is critical in preventing domestic violence from escalating to murder. Access to resources and support. One of the key challenges for victims of domestic violence is gaining access to the resources they need to leave their abusers safely. Shelters, legal assistance, and counseling services are essential for helping victims escape dangerous situations. In Estrea's case, she may not have had access to the support she needed to permanently break away from Arnaldo, which ultimately led to her death. Expanding access to these services and ensuring that victims know where to turn for help could save lives. Addressing the cycle of abuse, domestic violence often follows a cyclical pattern, with periods of reconciliation and calm followed by renewed violence. Estrea's decision to marry Arnaldo, despite the history of abuse, may have been part of this cycle. Abusers frequently use manipulation, threats, and promises to convince their victims to stay, making it incredibly difficult for them to leave. Understanding this cycle and providing long-term support for victims is crucial in breaking the pattern of abuse. Law enforcement's role. Law enforcement plays a critical role in protecting victims of domestic violence, but they are often limited by what they can do without cooperation from the victim. In cases where victims withdraw protective orders or refuse to press charges, abusers are often able to continue their behavior unchecked. Developing better strategies for law enforcement to intervene, even when victims are hesitant to press charges, could help prevent further violence. 5. Final thoughts. The murder of Estrea Carrera Rios at the hands of her husband, Arnaldo Jimenez, is a tragic reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence. The case highlights the need for greater awareness of the warning signs of abuse, more resources for victims, and better intervention strategies from law enforcement. While Arnaldo has evaded capture for years, the ongoing manhunt shows the determination of law enforcement to bring him to justice. Estrea's family continues to grieve the loss of a beloved daughter, sister, and mother, while her children grow up without their mother, waiting for justice to be served. The hope is that one day, Arnaldo Jimenez will be captured, and the family can finally find some measure of closure. Until then, the case serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of protecting those who are most vulnerable and ensuring that no one is trapped in a cycle of violence without a way out.